Welcome to Life Story 999. Today, we bring you a deeply moving story about respect, resilience, and redemption. Watch as an elderly woman, unexpectedly, becomes a quiet force for change in an elite restaurant kitchen, challenging prejudice and igniting transformation. Hit the like button if you're as intrigued as we are, leave your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories. In the heart of the city stood La Sublime, a prestigious restaurant renowned for its gourmet cuisine and opulent atmosphere. The dining room was a place of elegance, where chandeliers sparkled above and patrons savored every dish as if it were an exquisite masterpiece. But behind the polished facade of La Sublime lay the true pulse of the establishment, the kitchen. Here, tensions boiled as much as the sauces on the stoves, and every order barked out by Chef Robert felt like a whip crack across the backs of his staff. Chef Robert was a perfectionist, celebrated for his culinary artistry and his uncompromising dedication to his craft. He demanded nothing short of excellence, ruling his kitchen with a strict hand. His salt and pepper hair and sharp gaze carried an air of authority that made even the bravest of line cooks hesitate. But beneath his mastery was a man whose standards often translated into harsh words and relentless criticism. The kitchen was a realm of fear, and those who worked within its stainless steel walls knew that even a small mistake could earn them Chef Robert's wrath. One day, into this world of fire and steel, stepped Evelyn. At 68, she was a stark contrast to the young, stressed-out cooks scrambling under Chef Robert's commands. Evelyn was quiet and unassuming, her hands showing signs of a life filled with hard work, her gentle demeanor a balm in the chaos of the kitchen. She took on the humble role of dishwasher, standing in the back with sleeves rolled up, tackling the endless piles of dishes and cookware that stacked up during the rush. There was nothing remarkable about her presence, or so it seemed. Despite her quiet nature, Evelyn possessed a kind of resilience that was rare. She didn't flinch under Chef Robert's sharp tone or rush to appease him when he barked orders. She simply did her job, her presence steady, her spirit unwavering. The others in the kitchen began to notice this. She never snapped back, never showed frustration, and this quiet strength started to subtly influence those around her. The staff, who had grown accustomed to surviving each shift, began to see a different way to be, a calm amidst the storm. Evelyn was changing the kitchen dynamic, even if no one fully realized it yet, including Chef Robert himself. As Evelyn settled into her role at La Sublime, she began to understand the dynamics that defined the kitchen. The gleaming countertops and top-tier equipment could not mask the atmosphere of constant tension that pervaded every corner. Chef Robert's presence loomed large, his voice often echoing through the walls as he barked out commands or scolded staff for even the slightest imperfection. He ruled the kitchen with a voice that could make even the most seasoned cooks flinch, and Evelyn saw firsthand how each reprimand chipped away at the team's morale. Yet Evelyn, with her gentle demeanor, did not let herself become a target of fear. She worked diligently at her station, scrubbing pots and rinsing pans, her focus unwavering no matter how chaotic the kitchen became. Her calm presence began to stand in stark contrast to the frantic energy around her, where others rushed and panicked. Evelyn remained composed, her movements efficient but never hurried. It was as though she carried a sense of peace into the very heart of the chaos, and the staff began to take notice. Evelyn's resilience became a quiet anchor for those around her. She was older than most of the other staff members, but her age carried with it a wisdom that was palpable. She had faced challenges in her life, and the kitchen's pressure cooker environment was something she knew how to navigate without letting it consume her. The younger cooks often glanced at her, wondering how she remained so unbothered by Chef Robert's sharp words or the relentless pace of the kitchen. For some, Evelyn's quiet determination was a reminder that there was a way to endure, that not every challenge had to be met with the same frenetic energy that Chef Robert seemed to demand. One afternoon, during a brief lull in the dinner rush, Evelyn overheard two young line cooks speaking in hushed tones near the pantry. They were unaware of her presence as they leaned against the shelves, their voices filled with exhaustion. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," one of them said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, it's just more of the same. Nothing we do is ever good enough for him. I thought working at La Sublime would be different, but—" His friend nodded, a resigned expression on her face. "Yeah, it's like no matter how hard we try, we never get it right. I used to love cooking, but now it just feels like a burden. Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it." Evelyn's heart ached for them. She could hear the weariness in their voices, the hopelessness that had begun to take root. She knew that feeling all too well. The sense that your efforts were meaningless, that no matter how much you gave, it would never be enough. She watched them for a moment longer before quietly returning to her station. She understood why they felt trapped. The prestige of working at La Sublime was both a blessing and a curse, offering opportunity, but at a steep cost to their self-worth. But Evelyn also knew something else. Change was possible. She had lived long enough to see it, to experience the transformations that could come when people decided to stand up for themselves, to demand better. And while she couldn't change the entire culture of the kitchen on her own, she believed that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be the spark that others needed to find their courage. She believed in patience, in the quiet strength that comes from weathering life's storms without losing who you are. Day by day, Evelyn continued her work, her eyes taking in everything around her. She saw the fear in the line cook's eyes when Chef Robert approached, saw the way their shoulders tense whenever he raised his voice. But she also saw their talent, their dedication, qualities that deserved recognition, not scorn. She knew they needed someone to remind them of their worth, to help them see that the fear they lived under was not the only way to succeed. And so Evelyn made it her mission, in small and subtle ways, to be that reminder. She offered a kind word when a cook seemed on the verge of tears, a reassuring smile when someone made a mistake. She listened when others spoke, truly listened, giving them the space to share their frustrations without fear of judgment. Slowly, she began to see a change, not in Chef Robert but in the staff. They began to find moments of laughter again, small bursts of camaraderie that cut through the tension like a breath of fresh air. It was not much, but it was a start. Evelyn knew that real change would take time, but she also knew that it was possible, that even the most oppressive environments could be transformed when people chose hope over fear. She had no grand plan, no sweeping gestures. She simply continued to be herself, to bring her quiet strength into the kitchen each day. And in doing so, she began to plant the seeds of something better. A hope that one day, La Sublime could be a place not just of excellence, but of respect and kindness as well. Noticing Evelyn's unyielding calm, Chef Robert began to target her directly. He couldn't understand how this elderly dishwasher, who seemed so out of place in the demanding environment of La Sublime, remained unfazed by the relentless pressure. His frustration turned into mockery. He called her grandma in a tone that was anything but affectionate, and frequently questioned her competency. "Are your old eyes even capable of seeing these dishes properly, Evelyn?" he would sneer, his words dripping with disdain. But Evelyn remained unshaken. She responded to each jab with a gentle smile, her hands never stopping their work as she washed, rinsed, and dried the mountain of dishes before her. Her resilience seemed only to infuriate Chef Robert further, and his comments grew harsher. The staff watched silently, many of them wincing at the cruelty of his words, but they also marveled at Evelyn's quiet strength. There was something about her that made them want to protect her, to rally behind her in ways that were small but meaningful. One day, during a particularly hectic dinner rush, Chef Robert saw an opportunity to humiliate Evelyn in front of everyone. He grabbed a pot she had just washed, holding it up theatrically for the rest of the kitchen to see. "Look at this," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the tiled walls. "Is this what passes for clean these days? Water spots everywhere. Maybe it's time you find a job better suited for someone your age, like knitting blankets in a rocking chair." The other cooks exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts aching for Evelyn. Evelyn paused for a moment, a tear threatening to escape as she looked at the pot. She blinked it away, her face composed, and took a deep breath. "I'll do better, chef," she said softly, her voice steady. Then, she simply returned to her station, picking up the next pot as if nothing had happened. Her dignity remained intact, and the quiet grace with which she handled the situation resonated deeply with the rest of the staff. They had never seen anyone take Chef Robert's cruelty with such poise. From that moment, the staff began to change how they acted around Evelyn. They made sure her station was stocked with fresh towels and dish soap. They helped carry the heavier loads when Chef Robert wasn't looking. Little by little, they found ways to show their support for her. Evelyn's strength inspired them. It showed them that there was a different way to endure the pressure of the kitchen, one that didn't involve sacrificing their dignity. Chef Robert, however, remained oblivious to the effect Evelyn was having on his kitchen. He saw only an old woman who refused to break, and it angered him. He was used to fear being the driving force behind the staff's compliance, and Evelyn's refusal to be intimidated was a direct challenge to his authority. He began finding more reasons to berate her, his voice growing louder, his words more biting. Yet Evelyn never lost her composure. Her calmness seemed to act as a shield, one that Robert's words could not penetrate. One particularly tense evening, after a long day of relentless orders and constant berating, Evelyn found herself alone in the small staff break room. She allowed herself a moment to sit down, her body weary but her spirit unbroken. One of the line cooks, Maria, entered the room, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Evelyn, I don't know how you do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's so awful to you, and you never let it get to you." Evelyn looked up, her tired eyes meeting Maria's. She gave a small, gentle smile. "I've learned that people like Chef Robert are often battling something within themselves," she said softly. "His words may be cruel, but I won't let them define who I am. If I lose my kindness, then he truly wins." Maria nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She had never heard anyone speak about Chef Robert like that, with understanding rather than anger. "We're all behind you, you know," Maria added. "The rest of us, we see what you're doing, and it means a lot." Evelyn reached out, giving Maria's hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, dear. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to stand their ground to remind others of their own strength." The door to the break room opened again, and a few more cooks entered, each offering Evelyn a small smile or a nod. They all knew that Evelyn had become more than just a dishwasher. She was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of relentless pressure, one could remain true to oneself. Chef Robert continued his tirades, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in his kitchen. But Evelyn knew that something had shifted. The staff no longer looked at her with pity. They looked at her with admiration. And in those shared glances, Evelyn saw hope. Hope that one day, La Sublime could be a place where talent was nurtured, not crushed, where respect was given as readily as orders. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. As tensions continued to rise at La Sublime, preparations were underway for one of the most important events in the restaurant's history, a grand evening hosting top food critics and influential bloggers from around the world. The anticipation was electric, the pressure immense. Every detail had to be perfect. The kitchen, already a pressure cooker, was pushed beyond its limit as Chef Robert barked commands louder and more relentlessly than ever. Mistakes were not tolerated, and the atmosphere felt like a storm ready to break at any moment. Evelyn moved through the chaos as she always did, her hands steady as she washed dish after dish, her eyes observing the growing tension around her. She could see the stress etched into the faces of the line cooks, the way their shoulders tensed with each shout from Chef Robert. As the night drew closer to the pivotal moment when the critics would be served, the kitchen seemed to buckle under the pressure. A missed ingredient here, an overcooked dish there. The mistakes were small but enough to send Chef Robert into a frenzy. In the midst of this frenzy, Evelyn suddenly found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. One of the sous chefs accidentally spilled a pot of sauce, and Chef Robert, already teetering on the edge, snapped. His eyes locked onto Evelyn, who happened to be standing nearby, and his face twisted with anger. "You!" he shouted, his voice a roar above the clatter of the kitchen. "You can't even do the simplest of tasks without making a mess. What are you even doing here?" Before Evelyn could respond, Chef Robert grabbed her by the arm, dragging her through the kitchen doors and into the dining area. The room fell silent. The elegantly dressed patrons, including the esteemed critics, turned to watch as Chef Robert pulled the elderly dishwasher to the center of the room. His face was red with fury, his voice dripping with disdain. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of incompetence I have to deal with. This woman can't even wash dishes properly. How can we expect excellence with people like her in the kitchen?" Evelyn stood there, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but her expression calm. She didn't flinch, even as the eyes of the room bore down on her. The air was thick with tension, the silence oppressive, until it was broken by a firm, commanding voice. "That's enough, Robert. Let her go." The entire dining room turned towards the entrance, where a well-dressed man stood. He was tall, his suit impeccably tailored, his presence authoritative. It was Andrew, Evelyn's son, and unbeknownst to many, the owner of La Sublime. He strode confidently across the dining room, his gaze locked on Chef Robert, who stood frozen, his grip still on Evelyn's arm. "Andrew," Chef Robert began, his voice faltering as he let go of Evelyn and stepped back. The shock was evident on his face. He looked from Evelyn to Andrew, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening. I didn't know she was." Andrew cut him off with a sharp glare. "It doesn't matter who she is, Robert. What matters is how you treat the people who work for you. Every single member of the staff deserves respect, no exceptions." His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, a warning that there would be consequences for what had just happened. Andrew turned to his mother, his expression softening. "Are you all right, Mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, a stark contrast to the harshness he had just used with Chef Robert. Evelyn nodded, giving her son a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Andrew," she said gently, her composure intact despite the scene she had just endured. Andrew turned back to the dining room, addressing the guests who were watching with wide eyes, many of them shocked by the turn of events. "I apologize for the disturbance," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that filled the room. "This is not the kind of establishment I want La Sublime to be. I want it to be a place of excellence. Yes, but also of respect for the food, for the guests, and most importantly, for the people who make it all possible." Chef Robert stood there, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find words. The confident, authoritative chef seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind a man who looked lost, unsure of what to do. "Andrew, please," he started again, his voice almost pleading. "You know the pressure we're under tonight. I didn't mean..." But Andrew wasn't interested in excuses. He raised a hand, cutting Robert off once more. "I know exactly what kind of pressure you're under, Robert, but pressure is no excuse for cruelty. You've forgotten what makes a kitchen thrive. It's not fear, it's respect and teamwork." He turned to the rest of the staff, who had gathered at the doorway, watching the scene unfold. They stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide as they looked at Evelyn and Andrew. Andrew took a deep breath, his eyes moving from one staff member to the next, his voice steady as he spoke. "From today forward, things are going to change. No one here deserves to be treated the way my mother or any of you has been treated. I want La Sublime to be the best, but not at the cost of dignity or respect. If we're going to continue, we'll do so together as a team." The room remained silent for a moment longer before the sound of soft applause began to fill the space. It started with one of the critics, then spread throughout the room until the entire dining area was applauding. The kitchen staff, still standing in the doorway, exchanged glances, expressions of hope and disbelief passing between them. Evelyn looked at her son, her eyes shining with pride. She reached out, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Andrew," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "for standing up for us." Andrew smiled, his eyes meeting his mother's. "Always, Mom," he replied, his voice just as soft. He turned back to Chef Robert, whose face had turned from red to ashen. "Robert," Andrew said, his tone now devoid of warmth, "I think it's best if you take a leave of absence. Reflect on what's happened here. We'll discuss your future with La Sublime after you've had some time to think." Chef Robert nodded, his face blank. The fight drained from him. He turned and walked towards the kitchen, his step slow, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. As the door to the kitchen swung shut behind him, Andrew turned back to the dining room. "Now," he said, clapping his hands together, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Let's get back to enjoying the evening, shall we?" The tension in the room began to dissipate, conversation slowly resuming as the guests returned to their meals. In the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The staff, who had once lived in fear of Chef Robert's wrath, now felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. They gathered around Evelyn, offering her words of gratitude and admiration. She smiled at each of them, her eyes filled with warmth. "We're going to be all right," she said softly. "Things are going to change, and we're going to make this place better. Together." The staff nodded, their spirits lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, La Sublime didn't feel like a place of dread. It felt like a place of possibility. And it was all because one woman had the courage to stand her ground, to face cruelty with kindness, and to inspire others to do the same. Following the confrontation in the dining room, Andrew gathered the staff in the kitchen. The tension from the earlier scene still lingered, but Andrew's presence brought a calm determination. He looked around at each of them, his gaze filled with empathy. "I know that what happened tonight was difficult, but it was also necessary," he began, his voice steady. "From this day forward, La Sublime will be a place not only of culinary excellence, but also of respect and mutual support. Every one of you deserves to work in an environment that values you." The staff exchanged glances, a mixture of hope and uncertainty in their eyes. They had heard promises before, but something in Andrew's demeanor told them this was different. Chef Robert stood at the back, his face a mask of defensiveness, but there was a vulnerability there too, a recognition of the line he had crossed. Andrew turned his attention to him, his expression softening slightly. "Robert, I understand the pressures of this job, but pressure doesn't excuse cruelty. I need you to reflect on what happened here tonight. If you're willing to change, then there's a place for you here." Chef Robert swallowed hard, his defenses crumbling as he met Andrew's gaze. He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I've let the stress get the better of me, and I've treated all of you unfairly. Especially you, Evelyn." He looked toward Evelyn, his eyes filled with regret. "I've been wrong, and I want to make it right. If you'll allow me, I'd like to prove that I can be better." Evelyn stepped forward, her kind eyes meeting Robert's. She nodded, her voice gentle but firm. "We all make mistakes, Robert. What matters is what we do to make up for them. If you're truly willing to change, I'll support you." Her words hung in the air, a beacon of grace and forgiveness. The staff seemed to collectively exhale, the tension slowly melting away, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Andrew smiled, a warmth spreading across his face as he looked at his mother. He turned back to the staff. "We have a lot of work to do, but I believe in all of you. Tonight, we begin a new chapter for La Sublime, one where we lift each other up, where we find strength in unity, not fear." The staff nodded, some of them smiling for the first time in what felt like ages. There was a spark of hope, a belief that things could truly be different. In the days that followed, the changes were palpable. Chef Robert, once feared for his temper, made a conscious effort to connect with his team. He listened more, his voice softer, his demands tempered with understanding. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when old habits threatened to resurface, but each time he caught himself, remembering the promise he had made. Evelyn was there to encourage him, offering her support not just in words, but in action. She worked beside him, guiding him in moments when patience was needed, reminding him of the value of kindness. The kitchen staff, inspired by Evelyn's resilience and Andrew's leadership, began to work together in a way they hadn't before. There was laughter again, small moments of joy that broke through the intensity of their work. Maria, the young line cook who had once feared speaking up, found herself offering suggestions during prep, her confidence growing as she realized her voice was valued. The sous chefs, who had once dreaded Robert's scrutiny, now found in him a mentor willing to teach rather than criticize. One afternoon, during a rare, quiet moment, Chef Robert approached Evelyn at the dishwashing station. He watched her work for a moment before speaking. "I never realized how much strength it takes to do what you do," he said, his voice sincere. "You've shown me what real leadership looks like, Evelyn. It's not about power or control. It's about lifting others up. I'm grateful for that lesson." Evelyn looked up, her eyes crinkling with a smile. "Leadership comes in many forms, Robert. Sometimes it's about being the loudest voice, but more often, it's about being the calm in the storm. You're learning, and that's what matters." She handed him a clean towel, her gesture simple but full of meaning. Robert took it, a smile tugging at his lips, a sense of camaraderie forming between them. The grand event that had once been a source of dread for the staff became a turning point for La Sublime. The critics and influencers who had witnessed the confrontation were intrigued by the changes they saw. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. It was still a place of high standards and exquisite cuisine, but now there was something more, something intangible that made the experience richer. Guests could feel the difference in the way dishes were presented, in the smiles of the staff, in the warmth that had begun to permeate every corner of the establishment. Andrew watched from the sidelines, pride swelling in his chest as he observed the transformation. He knew it wouldn't be easy. True change never was, but he believed in the people who worked at La Sublime. He believed in their ability to create something extraordinary, not just in the dishes they served, but in the environment they cultivated. He glanced at his mother, who was speaking with one of the young cooks, her presence a steadying force in the bustling kitchen. She caught his eye and smiled, and he returned it, knowing that none of this would have been possible without her. Evelyn had become the heart of La Sublime, her quiet strength inspiring everyone around her. And as the restaurant moved forward, it did so with a renewed sense of purpose. To be a place where excellence and respect went hand in hand, where every member of the team was valued, and where kindness was a secret ingredient that made everything better. It was truly a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, La Sublime underwent a transformation. The oppressive atmosphere that had once plagued the kitchen began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and unity. Chef Robert, who had always been known for his fiery temper, took to heart the lessons he had learned. He began to change, slowly but surely, striving to be the leader his team deserved. He balanced his high standards with a newfound respect for his staff, recognizing their efforts and treating them with the kindness they had always needed. The changes were not immediate, nor were they always easy. There were moments when Robert's old habits threatened to resurface, but each time, he remembered the confrontation in the dining room, the disappointment in Andrew's eyes, and the quiet strength of Evelyn. He used those memories as a guide, reminding himself of the kind of leader he wanted to be. He listened more, encouraged creativity, and made sure his praise was as vocal as his critiques once were. Slowly, the staff began to trust him again. Evelyn remained a cherished part of the restaurant, her wisdom and warmth nurturing the positive environment that was taking root. She continued her work at the dishwashing station, but her role had evolved beyond that. She was now a mentor, a confidant, and an inspiration. Her quiet bravery had empowered others, giving them the courage to speak up and the confidence to know their worth. Evelyn's presence was like a steady flame, lighting the way for those around her. The staff, once fearful and downtrodden, found their voices. Maria, the young line cook who had once been too intimidated to offer her ideas, now spoke up freely, her suggestions welcomed by both Robert and her peers. The sous chefs, who had once dreaded the scrutiny of their head chef, now found in Robert someone who was willing to teach, to guide, and to learn alongside them. The atmosphere in the kitchen was no longer one of fear, but of collaboration. Creativity began to flourish as the staff felt safe to experiment, to fail, and to try again. One afternoon, Chef Robert approached Evelyn as she stood at her station, her hands busy with the endless stream of dishes. He paused for a moment, then spoke, his voice filled with sincerity. "Evelyn, I want to thank you," he said. "You reminded me of what truly matters, not just in the kitchen, but in life. Respect, humility, the power of second chances. I've learned so much from you." Evelyn looked up, her eyes softening with a smile. "We all need reminders sometimes, Robert. What matters is that you're trying, and that's what makes the difference." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that Robert felt deeply. He nodded, grateful for her grace and her unwavering belief in his ability to change. The transformation of La Sublime did not go unnoticed. Guests began to comment on the warmth of the atmosphere, the way the staff seemed genuinely happy to be there. The food, always exquisite, now carried with it a sense of joy and passion that could be tasted in every bite. The critics who had witnessed the confrontation returned, curious to see if the promises made that night had been fulfilled. They were not disappointed. The restaurant had become a place where excellence was pursued not through fear, but through respect and collaboration. Chef Robert, forever changed, stood at the helm of his kitchen with a new sense of pride, not just in the food they created, but in the people who made it all possible. And at the heart of it all was Evelyn, whose quiet courage had sparked a transformation none of them could have imagined. La Sublime was no longer just a restaurant. It was a testament to the power of change, the importance of compassion, and the beauty of redemption. Thank you for joining us at Life Story 999. This story shows us that dignity and compassion can transform even the toughest environments. Evelyn's kindness and resilience turn an oppressive kitchen into a place of respect, inspiring lasting change. Remember, true strength lies in how we treat others. If you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Life Story 999 for more heartfelt tales.